Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. All right. Hope you can see my screen. So yesterday we were discussing the ASR workflow, but unfortunately there was a power cut happened, so I had network issues. So what I'll do, I'll quickly just walk through the scenarios. Then we will jump into the physical to Azure application configurations, though we may not be able to complete that successfully because we don't have the environment ready. But I wanted to give you some experience on how the tool looks, how we configure the things if we have a physical server environment. So that is the agenda for today. Um, Tomorrow, we will discuss about Azure Migrate. Um, I mean, what is the setup and what are the things required to configure Azure Migrate. I'll try to fetch the sample report where you can see assessment details, right? So that's the agenda for these 2 days. So let me quickly start the ASR workflow. Okay. So be it on-premises to Azure application or Azure to Azure application. So when I say Azure to Azure application, you're replicating the data between the two regions. Okay. So any workflow, I mean any scenario, you have few things. That is something like enable protection. We also call as a enable replication job. Okay. So during the enable protection job, what we do is we configure the replication for our virtual machine. Okay, we are just adding the VM to the replication. Then the next step would be initial replication. Okay, I'm going to call two phases, phase one and phase two, because we are talking about the DR scenario, right? So initial replication will start. Okay, once the initial replication is completed, when I say initial replication, the data which is there in the disk, which is associated with your VM, the data has to replicate it to the target location. Once the complete data replicated, you will see the VM status into protected. Okay, replication status will be healthy. Okay, and you will see the recovery points. Okay, these are the things that you will observe once the initial replication is completed. Okay, so once the initial replication is completed, right, you will see this. Then what is the next step? The next step would be test failover and failover. These are the next two steps. So we can avoid the test failover. Microsoft recommend to perform a test failover. The reason why we go for test failover is instead of you know um, making production environment complex, you do a failover for the production. What if the production servers are not coming online? Your applications are not working fine. So you will see a great impact. I mean, these scenarios, the test failure scenarios will help you if you wanted to conduct a mock DRs or test DRs, not the real DR scenarios. But the challenges with this, if you have a network, if you have an isolated network, that is fine. Otherwise, you will see a lot of application and host name conflicts. Let's say you are doing a failover to the target location VNet, and that VNet connected to your production resources, and your source region VM is there and target region VM is there. And the target region you have a test VM when you have a test failover, but inside the VM the host name will not change. In Azure portal the VM name will change hyphen test, your VM name hyphen test, but within the operating system the host name and its entries and its GUIDs will not change. So you will see application conflicts, a hostname conflicts where your application will get confused whom to reach out, and DNS entries will be updated. There will be a lot of issues. If you have a dedicated network, separate network which is not even touching the production environment, then you are good with the test failover. Okay. Otherwise, most of the organization they conduct the failover operation before the customer goes to the live. Okay, before they move the production to the live, right? So they wanted to ensure that if real DR scenarios occurs, they are ready for it. That's why they do mock DRs on the production environment. Okay, they do a failover. Once a failover is completed, then phase two will begin, right? So in the phase two, you have your VMs up and running, right? So until failover, before the failover, right? Your source will be active region. Okay, okay. Now, once a failover completed, post failover, right? Okay, your target will be active region. Okay, your target will be active region. Pre failover, secondary region. Okay, and post failover, here it is going to be secondary region, or secondary region. Okay, now if you wanted to come back to the primary region, okay, you have been running these VMs in the secondary for a while, let's say couple of days, and by the time your primary region is up, you wanted to fail back your resources from secondary to the primary, because you use this failover just for the you are using the secondary region just for the DR purpose. You are not going to run your workloads in the secondary all the time, right? You wanted to fail back, so let me say failback. Failback has couple of other steps to be followed. Okay. So if you want to fail back, first of all, you need to do a commit. This is the process. When you do commit, all the stale recovery point, I mean, all the recovery points will be removed and you'll only have the current state. Okay. Then you need to initiate a reprotect. Okay. When you say reprotect is not nothing but re-enabling replication. Okay. What happens when you do a failover and when you commit and when you do a failover, right? So the sync from source to target will be completed. Okay. Everything will be running on target, right? Source to target, right? Everything will be running on target. So if you wanted to go back to the primary, you need to re-enable the replication from target to the source, reverse direction. Okay. When you enable replication from target to source, right? What happens is resynchronization happens. Okay. The resynchronization happens where the data will be synchronized from target to the primary. Okay. So let me just name this resynchronization. It's like a initial replication, what you have done in the phase one to phase two. Here, it is not an initial replication, it is a resynchronization, because the disk, everything will be available in the source, but what happens is they are not active. So whatever the changes happen here, those changes will be resynchronized back to this primary. And why this process take time, and I've shared one link in the group chat why resynchronization takes time, resynchronization or reprotection. Okay. So once this is completed, right, then you will see, oh, once the resynchronization is completed, you will see the VM will be in a protected state and it will be in a healthy state, and you will see the recovery points available. And who is active? This will be active region. Okay. Now you will have a failover option enabled. Okay. Which means that failover and test failover, both options will be available here. Okay. These two options will be available. So you can perform a test failover or a failover from target to the source. Now active to the non-active, right? So phase two to phase one. Once a failover is completed, the VM will be up and running in the source. I mean the phase one. I mean origin location. Okay, and you think everything is validated. Okay, when you move back to the primary, everything is validated and everything looks good. Then again you have to do a commit. Okay, again you have to do a commit here. So you need to click on commit, not here. Here only you have to do commit. Sorry, here commit. Again you have to do a reprotect because you have to re-enable replication from source to the target again to continue the DR replication. What we have done is we have just tested, or maybe there is a real DR happen. We moved the server to the secondary and we brought them back to the primary. It is end to end is done, but you need to continue the DR replication again in case if something happen in future, you need to be ready for it. So again, you need to do a reprotect. When you do a reprotect and the same steps happen, it does the resync, and once resync is completed, you will see them in a protected status and healthy and all these things, whatever you see here. So these things will be again active, right? So your source will become active region and you will have an option to do a test failover and failover. So this is the end-to-end DR. Okay. So any questions so far? Are we
Um,
good?
well, so when you do the commit, right? So basically your primary and secondary changes, right? And post
No.
that you
No, I think
applied,
we until we do it failover, it won't change from secondary to primary, primary to secondary, isn't it, Raki?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
Commit just remove the existing recovery points.
yeah.
right? But commit you do it post
Failover.
um, failover only, right?
Right.
Right, and that's
So
when
I would say before when you decide to go for reprotect, then you do a commit.
right, when you decide to go for reprotect, that's when you do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's say now that you did reprotect, right? That means the replication has started happening again,
Yes. So
right?
reprotect,
So
where which
why
location
does
is the question here? So did we do on the phase two or phase one? Phase one also we do reprotect. Okay. To
right? So
yeah.
let's assume in phase two, the first
Mhm.
time when we did the test failover, right? So we did reprotect. That means the replication now has started happening to phase one disk. I mean the
Yeah.
disk in phase one.
Correct. Right.
Uh, so when this replication has started happening, why do we? What is the need of resync?
No
Because I
reprotect.
think we would make the make this VM available for use only once we do reprotect. No, so
Where
until that
where
time,
do we you? I mean, where do we make it online? Phase two or phase one?
right? No, so the phase two. So after the reprotect, only you will be making the VM available. I mean, the phase two VM available for use, right?
No, 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 no. Once you're done with the failover, okay,
Hmm.
from phase one to phase two, your VM is available and up and running. Okay, your users are
Okay.
accessing.
Oh,
Later you
users accessing.
decided, yeah, later I mean, yeah, users are accessing for a week. Let's say a week. After a week,
Hmm.
you have decided to go back to primary. Then you do commit. You can do commit immediately as well once your users are
Okay.
accessible. Okay, it's up to you.
Okay.
You
Hmm.
commit and you start reprotection. Reprotection is nothing but it's not a synchronization. You are configuring the replication for the VM, which is in the target location with the
Okay.
source location. It is like a
Okay.
enabling replication.
Right.
What
Right.
you've done there.
Enabling replication. So you were saying, let's say, um, fixing the phase one VM, takes some time, right? So until the
Correct.
time the phase two VM is up and running and there would be some changes, right? And
Right.
that is something would be synced as part of
Correct.
resynchronization,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, see one more question. So assume that your RPO time is 1 hour,
Which one? RPO.
RPO, right?
Okay. Just to be clear, like, are we talking about phase one or phase two now?
I mean, anyone, right? So let's say the first time we did the test failover, the RPO time was 1 hour.
Let's also be very clear, test failure or failover, because test failure is different and failover is different here.
Okay.
Normally,
So
we consider
failover.
normally
Failover, right?
RPOs are considered for production to DR, not DR to production, isn't it?
No, both. So when you re-enable replication, right, resync, the
Mm,
VM will come into the protected status once everything is completed. Then you will see your RPO and everything. Because when you want to do a failover, right, there will be a
mm,
recovery point created, and you will also look at the RPO values as well. So both the side, when you're doing a failure from primary to secondary, you look at the RPO and recovery points. And when you want to do a failback, right, this is
mm.
all failback,
Mm.
right? So this time also you look at the RPO and recovery points both.
Right.
Same,
So
just moving here and there. Yeah, go ahead.
right. So when you do the failover,
Yeah,
so say RPO time is 1 hour. So that
yes,
means the changes which happened in the last 1 hour would actually be lost,
yes,
right? So what about them? So they'll be lost.
they're lost.
They're lost. Okay. So
Yes.
there's no point to kind of recover those changes.
No, you cannot recover.
There's no way
So
you
yeah,
can't.
there's no
Okay.
way because the data is not synced to the target.
Hmm.
If I bring up the server in the target with last 1 hour
Hmm.
RPO, last 1 hour recovery point, right?
Hmm.
So within this 1 hour, whatever the changes happened, you cannot see in the target VM. In simple.
Right. Okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, one last question: what's the difference between test failover and failover? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Test failover. When you do a test failover, you're going to have a VM created in the target location with the hyphen test name. Okay.
hmm.
And it is not the actual failover. So when it's a test failover, it is only used for the testing the DR. Okay. It's not gonna, I mean, it's not like you will not, you may not, you need to have a separate test
Oh,
network.
basically, so you're saying the the primary, I mean, your phase one VM won't be down, right?
Yes.
You're just testing it, right?
Yeah. Testing
So,
to check whether DR is going to be success or not, failover is going to be
mhm,
success or not. After the failover, you are going to check the state of your VM, whether the VM will have the same state before the failover or not. Okay, those things you're going
mm,
to validate. If you have a, let's say you have a web server, okay, web server you are accessing before the failover. Post failover, can I access the web server or not? So if you wanted to access the web server, the way it was set in the primary or right, the same setup has to be there in the secondary. So you cannot have the production URL configured for your test failover VM. It has to be separate network, separate URL, because if I start using production URL, so the request will be confused whether to go to the source
mm,
region or target region. And that's a challenge. And another thing that I mentioned, when you do a test failover, the VM name can change in the target. But within the OS, you have something called host name and SIDs and GUIDs. They will not change. So if this test network or network in the target has your connectivity with the domain controllers or your network in the primary, right? So there will be a lot of conflicts. So that's why you need to have a dedicated network where it does not even touch the other workloads. There will not be any communication to the other workloads. You have a separate network where you can log into the server and validate everything, separate URLs to test. So it has to be isolated network. Okay, so most of the environment this setup won't be there. Okay, because of various
mm,
reasons. So that's why they usually ask for the downtime before they move this environment to the customers. access, they do a mock DRs, mock disaster recovery. So they will shut down the source machine and do a failover and route the request to the DR location and test everything is working fine. Then they'll bring back to the source. This is like, they conduct every 6 months or 1 year, before the customer go lives. So just to ensure we are ready for the real DR scenarios or situations. Okay.
Okay.
So just to give you some more context, how things happens right in the real world. Okay. Let's say
So let's
I.
say if this
Mhm.
was a web application, right? So behind the scene, you'll have to now point the application's web URL to the IP address of
Target.
the new disaster. I mean DR VM, right?
Right. So I'm going to explain you the same thing now. So just to
Okay.
give some more confidence, let's say I have web server 1, web server 2. Okay. I have them in a availability set or availability zone. Just to ensure that within the data center, if any racks goes down, so this takes care of it, right? And I have a load balancer which distribute the traffic. If one VM is going down, I have load balancer which distribute the traffic to available VM, correct? This setup we are very well aware of it. We have done the lab, right?
Right.
So web 1 and this is going to be web 2. Okay. Now post DR. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Let's say this is in a east US location. This is my primary. Okay. And I wanted to have similar setup in the secondary region. Just in case if something happened to this primary. So there is something called traffic manager. Okay. Azure traffic manager. In short, we say ATM. Okay. So in ATM, we have something called failover profile. Okay. Where you're going to set East US as my primary. Okay. And Central US as my secondary. Okay. So let me say this primary and secondary. It's like this. Okay. So once there is a real DR happen, so what happens is your customers end user is going to access the URL. So that point to the your traffic manager. Your traffic manager has a backend pool, backend configuration, IP address of your load balancer. The request goes to the load balancer. Load balancer has backend pool, so it will route the traffic to the available virtual machine, available web server. Okay, just in case if something happened to this entire region, what you're going to do? You're going to do a failover. When you do a failover, there will be a web server created one, two. Okay, and these VMs automatically added to the load balancer. You have the configuration in the site recovery replicate items properties. Okay, these VMs automatically add to the load balancer, and this load balancer IP already configured to this ATM. Okay, so let's say there is a RTO of like 30 to 40 minutes. These VMs has to be created and they will be automatically assigned to this services up and running. And by the time when user is trying to access ATM, think okay, primary region is not accessible. Okay, this seems to be like there is some issue. Let me route the traffic to the secondary region. The request will go here and route the traffic will be routed accordingly. So this is like automated setup. Everything is automated in most of the environments. Okay. So your question is answered, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So this is setup. I mean, this is at a high level. Okay. Hope ASR is very clear to everyone now. Disaster recovery.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's fine.
Okay. Okay. So, and one more thing I mentioned recovery points. Sorry, replication. What is that? Recovery plan. Last time we discussed if you wanted to failover set of VMs instead of going to each and every VM. Let's say web one do a failover, web two do a failover. You can create a recovery plan. In the recovery plan, let's say you have web servers and you also have a database server. Most of the scenarios you wanted to stop the DB server first, then stop the web servers. Okay, then start failover for the DB server, then start failover for the web servers. Bring up the DB services and DB server, then bring up the web servers, right? So this kind of things can be done with the help of recovery plan. You need to go to recovery plan, create a recovery plan, add the machines. Let's say that you create two groups. There you have an option to create a group one, group two, or group three, n number of groups. You can place these machines in group one, group two, or group three. When you do a failover, you can do a failover, reprotect, and everything from the recovery plan itself. So when you do a failover, all the VMs in this recovery plan will be failed over to the target location. Okay, I think I've explained. But if not, I'm sharing another video that contains information. Okay, where you can see that. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now going to the another setup. Okay, so physical to Azure replication, physical server to Azure replication. Okay, we are going to say P2A. This is the scenario. Okay, here I have one physical server. Okay, I have one physical server. I'm going to say P2A VM, P2A, not the VM. And I wanted to replicate this to Azure cloud. Okay, I have recovery service vault created. Okay, and as discussed last time, in this on-prem environment, we also need one configuration server, right? See, I'm going to say CS, configuration server. Since we don't have the on-prem environment, okay, I've created these two machines in Azure itself. At least just to show you how to install a tool, how to register with the RSV, okay, and once I registered, how the view looks like, okay. So if I go to the Azure portal, and you can see there are two virtual machines in central India. Just think these two VMs are running in these two are servers running in your private cloud or on-premises environment. Okay, CSVM, P2A VM. Okay, in the CSVM, I'm going to install the unified setup agent, and P2A VM is something that I wanted to replicate to Azure. Okay, so let me take RDP to CSVM first. Okay, and I will download the unified setup agent and I'll show you all the options. I'm sure you remember the last sessions where we discussed about how to replicate on-premises VM to Azure. So this is my configuration server. Okay, if I go to the properties, I have created a VM with the 32 GB of RAM and 8 virtual CPUs. Okay, um, I have shared support matrix for this configuration server as well. What is this? How many CPUs are required and how much RAM is required and how much space is required. We don't have enough space, but we can still continue that. Okay. So just think this is the on-premises physical server. I have a dedicated server where I'm going to install the unified setup agent. If I go to Azure portal, I logged into the Azure portal in the same server and I created one recovery service vault in the east to west location. This is the Azure location. I'm going to fail over my servers to the east to west location. This is the scenario that we have to imagine. Okay. Now to configure the physical to Azure application under the getting started blade, go to site recovery and you have virtual machines to Azure, VMware virtual machines to Azure. You need to click on this scenario, click on prepare infrastructure. In the prepare infrastructure, you have something called deployment planner. As I mentioned last time, to do the assessment, okay, assessment whether to migrate or not, right? So we used to have this tool. We can say that I have done this already. This is like very legacy deployment tool. Um, it takes time and it's not suitable for us now. So going to the next one, are your virtual machines virtualized? My virtual machines are not virtualized because it is a physical server. If I say virtualized, I need to select the vCenter and the vSphere host. Okay. And I also need to add a configuration server in VMware scenario as well as the physical scenario. I'm going to say not virtualized. Now it says I need to select the configuration server from the drop down, but right now we don't have any configuration server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a configuration server. To add a configuration server, I need to download the unified setup agent. Okay, I'm downloading the unified setup agent. Okay, so is that? Where did that go? Okay, click on add configuration server. Okay, somehow it is not downloading. What I do is I copy the link address. Okay, I go to the browser, just enter. Now it is going to download. It has around 1.8 GB. Just to check whether I'm online. Yeah, I'm online. Yesterday I was speaking continuously for 15 minutes. I realized that there is a network issue later. Okay, it is failed again. I'm just restarting. Hope you are able to follow me.
Yes, Kamal.
Yes, yes, Kamal.
I just say yes or no sometimes because um,
Yes.
I'm in a remote session, right? So I don't know whether the session is continuing or not. I'm thinking that everything is online. Yesterday I was speaking for 5 to 10 minutes myself. Later I realized that okay, there is a network issue.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Since it is Azure VM, the download speed is very good. Okay, now we download the unified setup agent. I'm going to download the registration keys because we need to register this VM configuration server with the RSV. Download the registration keys. In the backup, we used to say vault credential. Now here we are saying vault registration key. Okay, going to this, refresh this page, right click, run as administrator, minimizing everything. So this takes a lot of time, the installation part sometimes. Okay, you remember I was speaking about configuration server, process server. This is the initial setup. So I can use configuration server and process server on the same node, same dedicated server. In case if you have more replicated items, more server to be replicated or migrate, right? You need to scale out your processor server. You need to have another server, dedicated server, and install the same tool, but you need to specify add additional process server to this to scale out the deployment. So I'm going with the first one and click next. I have to accept this. It is going to install MySQL as community server to store the replication database, to have the you know database for replicate items. Click next. This is where I'm going to upload my registration keys, which is in downloads. Next. So if you have any proxy in between, you need to select the second option. Right now we don't have any proxy. We are good to go. So you see it checks these things, minimum memory and the CPU checks. We are not meeting that, and restart pending is not there in this server, and all these things it will check. If you take your cursor here, it will tell you the server has only 4 CPUs, minimum is 8. Okay, and we don't have a free space, and free space I think we need around 600 GB, but we only have 127 GB on OS disk. Click next. We need to provide the root password for the MySQL. Click next. I don't have any VMware virtual machines. Click no here. If I say it's a different thing, it will ask for the VMware based installation. And this is where it is going to install this, and it needs 600 GB, but we don't have it. Still, we are good because we are testing it. So network interface card we have to select, and on this port, it receives the data. Okay. So we need to allow the inbound communication on this VM from the source machines. Click on install. So this process take time. It has to install the MySQL and check everything. It will install the configuration server. It will install the master target server. It will install the processor service server. So whatever we discussed in the last session, it is going to install everything. Once the installation is completed, um, we will seeing all actual configuration steps. Okay, so let's monitor. Maybe I'll keep you posted. It will take sometimes 15-20 minutes as well. Just keep you on mute. Keep.
So we download this unified setup agent on P2A, right?
No, CSVM.
Oh,
P2 is
configuration
the
server. Okay,
right.
got it, got it. Okay. P2A is something that
Source
we wanted
machine
to,
replicate.
you know, replicate. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
basically, you
mhm,
open this Azure portal on CSVM, right?
correct, correct.
And there itself,
I
you
downloaded
download it. Okay. Okay.
just to improve the download speed because it's going to use Microsoft bandwidth.
That was really quick, isn't it? 1.8
Yeah,
GB
yeah,
Point. Yeah.
in,
in
one
seconds.
and a half. Yeah, in a few minutes, in a few seconds. Yeah, yeah.
So, if you would like to be on a call, we can. Otherwise, we can connect tomorrow because this installation takes a while. It may take 15-20 minutes as well sometimes. So
Sure.
we can be on a call till 9 if you want. Otherwise, we can drop off. We can continue tomorrow. Anything is fine with me.
Tomorrow,
Yeah,
what time
let's
is it, Kamalaka?
8 a.m.
8 o'clock.
8 a.m. 8 a.m. Yeah. Okay, then let's continue tomorrow. We will check the remaining settings in tomorrow's session.
Oh,
Okay.
So Kamal, can we spend the last 5 minutes to see if there are any questions?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Go
mean, I
ahead.
have one. That's the reason. Okay.
No, no,
So
I'm okay.
this is not related to ASR, but in general. So let's say you create a VM, right? Or for that matter, any resource, right? Now, um, over the period, you make certain configuration changes, right? Be it any feature, right? I mean, related to that resource.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Now, with the same configuration, you wanted to create that resource in prod.
Hmm.
How do you do that?
Okay. So configuration as in,
Let's
let's
say I
say,
created a say a VM, right? And I did not attach any data disk, or for the matter, let's say it was only one data disk, and later on I added one more, or I did not enable, for the matter, let's say replication, or for the matter, any feature, right? I mean, lots and lots of feature for VM, right?
okay.
And that's something you do post the first time creation, right? Now you wanted to replicate the same with the exact same
So
configuration dot.
there are two things actually I wanted to ask. So configuration in the Azure end, configuration within the operating system. Okay, two things here, right? If we
Mm,
are talking about the configuration at Azure end, let's say as you mentioned, I created a VM. Later, I added a disk, I added a backup, I configured the DR, these things. Okay, this is the
mhm,
configuration. Now I wanted to create a new VM, okay, with the same settings. I don't want it to create a plain VM and again add a disk, again,
right,
configure backup, ASR manually, right?
right.
So we have something called templates, ARM
ARM.
templates. Okay, we can
Okay.
create one template. Okay, based on the we can just click on export the template from the VM blade. Okay, when you export it will give you all the configuration. You just need to modify those configurations and create it with the help of ARM templates.
So
So
basically, that standard template that Azure provides, right? You'll have to take that and modify that. I mean, so there's no feature as such which download, which kind of give me a snapshot of current in current. I mean, in time in time, state of that resource.
see, yeah, we have backup. Okay, you configure backup. You from while restoring, you create a new VM. Okay, it's going to create. Let's say if the VM has 2 disks, 3 disks, it creates a new VM with those
Mm,
3 disks. That's one option available, but it will not configure backup again. It will not configure the ASR again, right? Because you wanted to have a same configuration, not only the disk attached, right? You wanted to have more features, like say I want to create the VM in a same availability set, such kind of features, right? You always have to use the template. That's the easiest method. Okay, maybe in future where deployments you want to have a similar configuration, right? You just create one standard template, so you can create n number of VMs with that, right? As soon as a VM is created, you'll have the disk attached, you'll have the backup configured, you'll have the DR configured, you'll have the update management configured, you'll have the monitoring agent configured. Everything is configured, all the configurations at a platform level. Okay, we need to use this terminology. Anything that you're modifying in Azure, we call it as a platform. Anything in the operating system, we say OS level, right? So those things you can have it. But with this template, you cannot have the changes that are happened that the new existing VM has in the old operating system level. You may create a
mm.
VM with a plain image, but adding the backup, adding the ASR, adding the NIC, etc. But you cannot have the same copy of your existing VM like within OS. You might have installed some applications, you have done some changes in the OS folder, something, some
Right.
files. Those you
Mm.
cannot see them. If you want them to be available, then you need to create an image of your existing server. You can use that image to create n number of VMs. Again, you can use that image while creating a VM, right? You can still use that template to configure backup, to configure ASR and everything. But when you make that server, existing server as image, that existing server cannot be accessible. Okay.
So
So
basically, you'll have to use a standard template and make the changes to reflect those changes, right? Those configuration changes, and
configuration
that's
on the
what you,
platform level.
yeah, configuration on the platform level.
Correct.
Mm. There's no other way. I mean, I mean, I was thinking there could be something which will give you the um, you know the current snapshot of you know the resource, and that whatever is generated out of that, the ARM, you just use that and run it in, let's say, the other environment, and it creates the exact same you know resource with the same exact same configuration.
Configuration platform level can be done. The only thing is the configuration within the OS level, I mean the data within the OS level cannot be replicated same. So there are things, I mean you can automate that such process as well. Let's say
Hmm.
configuration part, you are anyways going to export the ARN template. That's step one. Okay. And step two, you are going to take a disk snapshot and creating a new disk from the snapshot. And once a VM is created, you're going to associate. So that's another step two you have to perform. And step three, you're going to create and attach the all the disks that are created from the snapshot. So there are workarounds and there are automation that can be done to fulfill your requirement. But that's like real complex scenario. And if it is real use case, then we can certainly do that as well. And again, there are a lot of conditions. Let's say not only platform level, you wanted to have the OS level changes as well, right? Data disk you can do it, but OS disk you cannot. Okay. The scenario what I mentioned, you take a snapshot of the disk and create a new disk from the snapshot and attach that to your newly VM created VM, and you want to create a new VM with the OS disk snapshot, right? But only thing is when you take a snapshot, the OS level components will not change. Like GUID, SIDs, host names. That's again a conflict. So those challenges you will see. The best method I would say for your requirement is, um, in case it's going to be your future deployments, right? You capture the
Mm.
existing server as an image and use the same configuration the platform level as a template, and combination of this image and configuration template of platform, you create a new VM so that you'll have the platform level configuration available and OS level data as well. But ad hoc basis it's not possible in the OS level.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the VM, it could be any resource. I mean, the use
Right,
case
right.
basically is, let's say you do your development in, say, the dev environment, right? Now, once you're done and you know, things are thoroughly tested, now you'll have to deploy that in prod, right? So how
Correct.
do you, first of all, create the exact same resources in prod, right? Before you actually test out things there, right? So let's say the storage account, right? That you created a storage account, and when you created, you did not um, enable the soft relief feature, and that's something you did it at a later point. And likewise, there were some more changes that you did. But how do you capture those changes and create, the storage account with the exact same, configuration in prod?
Yeah.
Is this what I am asking?
Right, right. The only option what you see is export template and create a new one. That's the easiest way I can
Mm,
see at the moment. That's what
okay,
even
but
even our team also follows.
okay. So basically, what you're saying is anything that you do in Azure, I mean, better you use templates,
Templates,
right?
correct.
So without
Right.
templates, it's going to be painful when you replicate things.
Definitely. I mean, there's no direct copy or clone options available.
No,
Yeah.
uh, that's. I mean, they could have given this feature to download the current state, current configuration, and use that as is.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say still Microsoft is far better. Within a short period of time, they have introduced a lot of things. Maybe things will improve. And most of the
Okay.
product that they are introducing have a lot of bugs. So they're not
Mhm.
stabilizing the existing stuff. They're just keep on implementing new things.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay,
good.
sure.
I mean, they are really good use cases. Okay. This is still taking time. I'm sure it will take next 10 to 15 minutes at least. Let's connect tomorrow. If you guys are okay, then we'll wait. Otherwise, we'll connect tomorrow.
I'll connect tomorrow.
Okay,
Okay,
then.
man.
See you
Thank you.
guys. Bye bye.
All right. Yeah.